You've probably heard someone say raw food is how the human body was really meant to eat. Here's what they won't tell you. No population of humans has ever survived long-term on a fully raw diet. Not once, not anywhere, in the entire archaeological record. Your body, right now, physically cannot run on raw food alone, and the reason traces back roughly 1 million years to a fire someone kept alive inside a cave. In 1999, a primatologist named Richard Wrangham proposed something that sounded almost absurd at the time, that cooking wasn't a convenience humans added late in their history. It was the single event that made the human brain possible in the first place. This will change how you think about what's actually sitting on your plate tonight. In 2012, an archaeologist named Francesco Berna led a team examining sediment inside Wonderwork Cave, a massive cavern in South Africa's Kalahari Desert that had already produced nearly 1 million years of continuous archaeological record. Using a technique that analyzes the microscopic structure of ash, Berna's team confirmed something that had been debated for decades: burned bone fragments and ashed plant remains, dated to approximately 1 million years ago, found deep enough inside the cave that the fire could not have been a wildfire that wandered in from outside. This was controlled fire, maintained inside a shelter, roughly 1 million years ago, nearly 600,000 years before Homo sapiens as a species even existed. The obvious question is why a species would go through the trouble. Fire needs fuel. It needs tending. It needs to be protected from rain and wind. For an early hominin already spending most of daylight hours searching for food, adding fire management looks, at first glance, like extra work for no clear benefit. But Wrangham's cooking hypothesis offered an answer rooted in basic chemistry, not habit or preference. Raw starch, the kind found in tubers, roots, and grains, is largely locked behind rigid plant cell walls that the human digestive system struggles to break down efficiently. Raw meat carries dense, tightly bound protein structures that require enormous amounts of chewing and digestive energy to extract. Cooking breaks both of those barriers before a single bite reaches the stomach. Heat ruptures cell walls, unwinds protein structures, and gelatinizes starch, meaning a cooked meal delivers dramatically more usable calories than the same food eaten raw, for a fraction of the digestive effort. Wrangham didn't just theorize this. In 2011, a researcher on his team named Rachel Carmody ran a direct experiment. Carmody fed one group of mice raw sweet potatoes and raw meat, and a second group the exact same foods, cooked, despite eating identical ingredients in identical quantities. The mice on the cooked diet gained significantly more body weight, clear evidence that cooking itself, independent of food type, unlocked additional calories the raw version simply couldn't deliver. That single finding reframes an entire chapter of human evolution. But it still leaves a gap in the timeline, because Wonderwork's evidence is scattered and occasional, not the kind of daily. Structured fire use a species would need to actually shift its biology. That gap started closing in 2014, when archaeologist Ruth Shahak Gross led a team examining Kesem Cave, a site outside Tel Aviv, Israel, occupied by early humans between roughly 420,000 and 200,000 years ago. Unlike Wonderwork's scattered ash traces, Kesem revealed something far more deliberate: a large, repeatedly used hearth positioned at the center of the cave, surrounded by a dense scatter of burned animal bone and flint tools clustered specifically around the fire itself. The placement wasn't random. Shahak Gross's team found that stone tool production and animal butchery were concentrated directly around the hearth, suggesting the fire wasn't an occasional event squeezed into the schedule. It was the organizing center of daily life, with meals processed, cooked, and shared in the same fixed spot, day after day, for tens of thousands of years. This is the missing piece Wonderwork couldn't show on its own. Not just that fire existed, but that cooking had become routine, structured, and social, regular enough, consistent enough to plausibly begin reshaping a body across generations. Around the same time cooking evidence starts appearing consistently in the archaeological record, something else was happening inside the human body. One organ was shrinking dramatically, while another was growing at a pace unmatched by any other primate. In 1995, anthropologists Leslie Aiello and Peter Wheeler published a theory now known as the expensive tissue hypothesis. The human gut, they showed, is roughly 60% smaller relative to body size than would be expected for a primate of comparable weight. Digesting raw, fibrous food requires a long, energy-hungry digestive tract working constantly. But once cooking pre-processed food outside the body, that same digestive workload dropped sharply, freeing up a significant amount of the body's daily energy budget. The brain, meanwhile, is the most metabolically expensive organ humans carry, consuming roughly 20% of total daily energy, despite making up only about 2% of body weight. Aiello and Wheeler's argument was direct the energy saved by a shrinking gut didn't just disappear. It was reallocated over evolutionary time toward fueling a rapidly expanding brain, a smaller gut, a bigger brain. Connected, according to this theory, by the moment food started arriving pre-broken down by fire, instead of raw and demanding on the body's own systems. But cooking didn't just change digestion and brain size, it changed the human skull itself. In 2016, researchers Catherine Zink and Daniel Lieberman at Harvard ran a study measuring the actual physical force required to chew raw versus cooked food. Using electromyography to track jaw muscle activity, they found that chewing raw meat required roughly twice the number of chewing cycles, and significantly more muscular force compared to the same meat cooked. Extrapolated across a full year, Zink and Lieberman calculated that early humans eating a cooked diet would have spent millions fewer total chewing cycles annually than a population eating everything raw, freeing enormous amounts of time and jaw muscle energy that over generations correlates with the smaller teeth, weaker jaw muscles, and flatter faces that distinguish Homo sapiens from earlier, heavier-jawed hominins like Homo erectus. Smaller teeth, weaker bite force, less time spent chewing every single day. Each one on its own looks like a minor detail. Together, they trace the physical signature of a species that had outsourced a huge portion of its digestive labor to something outside its own body of fire, tended and passed down, doing work the jaw and gut used to have to do alone. None of these pieces work in isolation, either. They form a loop. Cooking unlocked more calories per meal. Those extra calories funded a shrinking gut and an expanding brain. A bigger brain made possible more sophisticated fire management, better hunting strategy, and eventually language and long-term planning, all of which made cooking itself more consistent, more efficient, and easier to pass down to the next generation. Kesem Cave shows exactly what that loop looked like. In practice, a fixed hearth, generation after generation, at the physical center of everything else that happened in that cave. The raw food retreat charging premium prices today is, in a very real sense, asking the body to reverse roughly 1 million years of evolutionary outsourcing, asking a gut that shrank because fire started doing part of its job to suddenly do that job alone again. You ate something cooked today, probably without a second thought. Someone, roughly 1 million years ago, tended a small fire deep inside a cave in South Africa, and someone else, hundreds of thousands of years later at Kesem, built their entire daily life around keeping that same kind of fire burning, and in doing so, both quietly rewrote the human body in ways that are still, right now, sitting inside your skull.